So, when I say Vikings, what's the first image that comes to your mind? Big dudes with beards, giant axes, horned helmets, sailing across icy seas yelling, Valhalla? Yeah, most of that is wrong. Let's crack open 7 things you probably didn't know about the real Vikings, and trust me, it's gonna shake your Norse-loving soul. Number 1, Vikings never wore horned helmets. Let's get this out of the way first, and I need you to hear me loud and clear. Vikings did not, I repeat, did not wear horned helmets. I know, that's basically Viking cosplay 101 at this point, but it's pure myth. That whole horned look came from 19th century opera costumes. Yep, opera. Specifically Richard Wagner's Ring Cycle, where the costume designers thought, you know what would look epic? Viking dudes with horns. But in real life, Vikings weren't trying to win Best Dressed Barbarian. Their helmets were simple, domed, and built for survival. Iron or leather, no fluff, no horns, no nonsense. Honestly, wearing horns into battle would be like showing up to a UFC fight with coat hangers taped to your head. Super impractical and very breakable. And get this, we've only found one fully intact Viking helmet. Just one. That's how rare they are. Most warriors probably went into battle with just a leather cap or even nothing at all. So that image of Viking warriors charging into war with giant antlers like walking moose is pure fan fiction. 2. Viking was a job, not an ethnicity. Viking wasn't a race, tribe, or even a nation. It was basically the medieval version of being a freelancer. Yup. To go a Viking meant to set sail for raiding, exploring, trading, or occasionally pillaging if the vibes were off. You could be a farmer, a blacksmith, a goat wrangler, and then boom, sail off and go full Viking mode for the summer. The actual people were Norse, from modern-day Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. So not every Norse person was a Viking, and not every Viking was raiding monasteries. Some were merchants, some were explorers. Some just really liked sailing and accidentally ended up in other people's countries. It's kind of like how not every Italian is a pizza chef, but we still love them for it. 3. Viking women had more rights than you'd expect. Now here's where the Vikings really flipped the script. They're women, elite-level fierce. While women in most of Europe were being used as chess pieces in royal marriages, Viking women were out here like, actually, that farmstead is mine, I'll take the goats, and you can keep your sword and leave. They could inherit property, run businesses, file for divorce, and in some sagas, even wield weapons in battle. Were they running around in armor all the time like the movies show? Not exactly, but the myth of the shield maiden isn't that far off. Let's just say, Norse society had a pretty progressive patch update for the time. So next time someone says Vikings were all about toxic masculinity, remind them, Viking women didn't just sit at home, they ran it. 4. Vikings were surprisingly hygienic. Contrary to popular belief, Vikings weren't crusty, dusty dirtbags. They were low-key clean freaks. No, for real. Archaeologists have found grooming tools like combs, tweezers, razors, and even ear picks in Viking graves. Like, these warriors were packing more self-care items than a modern influencer going on a weekend trip. They bathed once a week, which in medieval times was basically luxurious. Meanwhile, folks in medieval England thought water would give you diseases. When next you hear Vikings were savage, tell them they probably smelled better than the guy narrating the history documentary. 5. They reached North America before Columbus. You thought Christopher Columbus was the first European to reach the Americas? Nah, fam. The Vikings beat him by almost 500 years. Long before Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, Leif Erikson, aka the chillest son of Eric the Red, landed in what's now Canada around 1000 AD. They called it Vinland, modern-day Newfoundland, Canada, probably because they saw wild grapes and got excited. And while they didn't set up permanent colonies, because, you know, cold weather, grumpy locals, and homesickness, they were still the first Europeans to set foot on North American soil. So technically, Columbus discovered America like, How you discover a pizza that someone else already ordered. 6. Vikings loved cozy stuff, stories, songs, and board games. When they weren't slaying dragons, okay fine, metaphorical dragons, or sailing through the North Atlantic like absolute legends, Vikings loved to chill. They were all about epic sagas, mead-fueled poetry, lyres and flutes, and one very spicy board game, Hnefatafel, pronounced Nefatafel, in case you want to impress someone at a Ren fair. These people lived for stories. That's why most of what we know about them today comes from oral traditions passed down through generations. They didn't just fight, they felt. The original warriors with emotional depth, we love to see it. 7. They had a thing for law and order. You'd think a society built on raiding would be all chaos and anarchy, right? Nope. The Vikings had laws and they took them seriously. They even had a parliament called the Althing, which started in Iceland in 930 AD, and it's still going today. That makes it one of the oldest continuous governments in the world. If someone broke a rule, it wasn't always off with his head. Sometimes it was fines, exile, or a good old-fashioned legal roast during the thing, which was like court, but way more intense and outdoorsy. So yeah, they may have been wild on the seas, but back home, Vikings had structure, respect the drip in the legal system. So there you have it. 7 surprising truths about the Vikings that totally mess with the Hollywood image. They weren't beer-chugging brutes. They were explorers, poets, traders, lawmakers, and yeah, sometimes raiders. If you learned something new, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and maybe shout Valhalla in the comments. And remember, history is way cooler when you dig a little deeper.